Hi, welcome to my very first book review video, and today I'm going to be talking about A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. I am one of those people who judged Nicholas Sparks for all of the formulaic movie adaptations, and even though I read books, I should know better. I gave it a shot, and I was obsessed with this movie when it first came out. I was in middle school. And I can seriously tell you that I loved the movie until I read the book. In A Walk to Remember, we have Landon Carter, 57 years old, looking back at the time when his life changed. He was 17 years old and he fell in love with Jamie Sullivan. The first thing I noticed about this book is the narration is very enjoyable to read. Landon Carter has a bit of that Southern charm. His honesty is so blunt sometimes that it made me laugh out loud. And he is very realistic. I found him very relatable as far as being that 17-year-old kid who maybe isn't the most popular. Maybe you have a friend or two that might be popular, but you don't necessarily want to bully anybody, but you don't want to be seen around the kids who do get bullied. There's that pressure that is so common in high school. If you haven't experienced that, you probably knew someone who was in that kind of crowd where you fit in, but you didn't quite do all the things that that crowd wanted you to do. Landon Carter is in the troublemaker crowd. However, it is set in the 50s. So the troublemakers that you see in the movie, which were updated to the early 2000s, are not the same. The worst thing that Landon and his friends did was they would hang out in the cemetery and yelling at the pastor or reverend that Heckbert Sullivan is a fornicator. Of course, they would be hiding behind the trees. And that was kind of the worst thing that they did. They didn't exactly treat kids nicely, but you don't know about or hear about any situations that are brutally bullying. Because Landon Carter is not necessarily a cruel person, and he doesn't go out of his way to make people's lives miserable, and he's really just more trying to avoid that for himself, he is a little bit more likable and, again, relatable. He's not incredibly unique, but he makes a perfect baseline for Jamie's character to contrast from. She is the very polite, very loving, caring success of a Mary Sue. This is the first Mary Sue I have ever read about where I actually enjoyed it, because she does have fitting reasons for why she is just always kind and wanting to help anybody that she can. Jamie helps out at the orphanage. She helps little injured animals on the side of the road. She helps an old lady with her groceries. She carries around her Bible everywhere she goes, and she talks about the Lord whenever she can, and not really in a judgy way. It's just who she is. So how do these two start romancing? Well, it is a lot different from a typical romance. I would say this book, unlike the movie, doesn't try to use teenage angst and physical romance to make the reader swoon. Instead, this is a drama about young, innocent love. It brings about way different feelings than the movie. It's unfortunate to say, but I think a lot of teenagers these days may not find as much of an interest as an adult would, because it does lack that typical teenage YA romance, which for me is not a bad thing. I honestly think a lot of YA romance is not the healthiest thing for a teenage mind. This is much more focused on what love is and what it means to care for someone. So to avoid spoilers, I tend to rate books on a 5-star basis. Characters plot, themes, prose, and world building or setting. So let's talk characters. We have our main character, Landon Carter, who is very interesting to read from. Again, he's realistic, relatable, funny. He starts off wanting to avoid being seen with Jamie. I said earlier she was the only Mary Sue I've ever read that I actually enjoyed, and I want to elaborate on that because most people would be like, how can she be a Mary Sue that works? Well, the whole point is she's not the trope of a Mary Sue. She is what most authors attempt when they accidentally make a Mary Sue. Her moments of weakness come from her trying to understand why other people find her kindness to be so strange, and it saddens her. But what is so respectable is it doesn't change her. The third most important character is Heckbert Sullivan. Yes, Heckbert. He is your typical man of the Lord, a Southern reverend, and Jamie Sullivan's father. Good qualities, I would say he's very headstrong. He loves Jamie so much. He has worked very hard. He raised her by himself because her mother died in childbirth. And he doesn't change just because he gets looked at strangely. Like father, like daughter. He does actually show some growth. As Landon becomes a more respectable young man, Hegbert starts to give him some of that respect that he deserves, while still remaining very protective of his daughter. But I would say in the movie, he is the character with the most similarities to his book counterpart. But I think they tried to make him a little bit more angry, and they definitely stole a lot of his depth. I think that I will make that video talking about the differences, because it actually made me a little irritated. If anybody has seen the movie, the play, it is nothing like what is in the book. It is completely different, and it really does steal something of the heart. Moving on to plot, I would say the romance was almost perfectly built up. And then there was a moment where everything starts to just rush a little too much, but there is a reason for that. You'll know when it is. And I really felt like it brought out the correct feelings that I was supposed to have. So the build-up, very good. I'm a little picky about prose. I would say that most authors put some of their best in page number 1 to get you interested. So I find that I may not be able to carry on through a book if the prose is incredibly bad. I now see why so many people like Nicholas Sparks. He puts a lot of personality in the character who is narrating. I was never bored, I would have to say. I found myself wanting to read more chapters each night and, losing a little bit of sleep. Now, world building and setting, I wouldn't say this one did it for me. It wasn't bad, but it didn't really take the time to frame exactly where you were. It did enough to tell you that it was in North Carolina. Was it North or South? It's wherever he lives. It was one of the Carolinas. And see, that's my issue. I think it was North. It's probably not North, but it was one of those Carolinas. So it did have some of that Southern charm, but it didn't really make me feel the setting with multiple senses, and that was it. And obviously that didn't affect my enjoyment of the book. It just happens to be one of the stars that I like to rate, because some of the books that I do read just really, really do a good job. And again, the narration kept me quite entertained. I would say even if you are someone who finds world building to be important, it isn't really important to this story if you would like to read a story about young love. Themes. This is a book that is just beautiful. unlike most romance books, which center more on physical fantasy, this is just heartwarming. I would say anybody could enjoy this if they're not looking for something, you know, hot and heavy, because let's face it, these are 17-year-olds, and if you were looking for something like that, that's a little weird. One thing that the movie never touched on is where the title came from. I think as a kid, I always thought, oh, it was the walk that they took on their date, or it was just when they were talking and walking at the same time. No, I don't want to spoil this, but this book spells it out perfectly, and it leaves me wondering why that wasn't why that wasn't addressed in the movie. If you've never read Nicholas Sparks, I would recommend this one to be your first book to read, because it's the only one that I have reviewed. But I would also say it gives a lot more surprises. Even if you know the ending, even if you've seen the movie, you are getting so much more to experience, and you'll find yourself surprised by what was taken away from certain characters. Yeah, I would recommend it. This gets a 4 out of 5 on the Blackbird scale. And don't worry, I'm not going to make a channel that is just all about romance books, or, you know, completely clean and tidy. I have lots of plans to read all different kinds of books. I have an entire 2 shelves worth of, not bookshelves, but like individual shelves on the bookshelf that are Stephen King. And I mean, I have modern ones, I have classic ones. I plan on reading a lot of stuff, including Harry Potter, which I've never read. And I feel like you're judging me already for either wanting to read it or having never read it. So I'm in that bowl right now. So the question is, which Nicholas Sparks book would you recommend next? Because it won't be my next review. I have other things that I'm currently reading, but this one really surprised me. The endings of most of them are not going to surprise me because I've watched a lot of the movies, but I am open to your suggestions. So we'll see. Thank you for watching. If this kind of content interests you, please consider subscribing. And I don't think I'm going to be making a Twitter or a Facebook page for this, so this might be the only place where you'll find my reviews. But if you like them, hey, if not, you can tell me about it. And until next time, keep reading. Bye.